This presentation today is on combine settings in canola, and we have three experienced growers joining us today to discuss that with everyone. I think we'll just jump right into it and start with Josh.
Alrighty, thanks, Chris. I farm south of Wilbur, Washington, between Wilbur and Odessa. Primarily 12-inch rainfall, winter canola, basically a 2-year crop rotation out where we're at. Winter wheat and winter canola, with trying to keep canola out of the rotation, or out of the mix or canola in the rotation every 3 years. Try not to go canola, wheat, canola. We're trying to go canola, wheat, wheat, or wheat, triticale, and then back to canola. And as far as combine settings, I run a 9870 John Deere combine and an S680 John Deere combine. One with a 35-foot auger header, flex header, and the S680 has a 40-foot McDon draper head on. And this is our first year with the draper header, was last year. Seemed to do well. The auger headers, just for whatever reason, they eat canola way better than a draper. There's some limitations with a draper, but they seem to work well as long as you have the cross augers. So as far as combine settings, I guess I'll start with the headers. If you're running an auger header, we always run our headers up off the platform basically as high as you can go. It lets everything flow in better. Doesn't get any wrapping or anything, just because you got so much material coming through there. Full finger augers, or I've never tried cutting canola without one, but I bet it's not as fun. And as far as the draper header, we found tilting it all the way up and as far as you can go, and using your reel as close as you can to the cross augers. So basically suck back as tight as you can to those cross augers, kind of making the canola contact those augers as best as you can, but not having to use your reel much at all. Basically as slow as you're going, as slow as your reel's going. The other thing on the John Deere flex header, they come with a crop divider that sticks way out. In this picture, you can see it's kind of far away, but it sticks way out. It's more or less like a soybean crop divider, but we found you throw that on in the canola and raise it all the way up, and it makes a heck of a difference. Keeps your reel out, everything. And I know there's a lot of those laying around that guys don't use them in wheat. I'd suggest if anybody can figure out how to put those on any header, you're going to like it. Like I said, there's probably a lot of them laying around. And obviously, as far as header height, take the least amount possible, especially with winter canola. Green stalks, stuff underneath pretty green. So take the least amount you need to. Combine settings, both combines are pretty much the same, except for the S680 does have a rethrasher. You got to be careful and try to keep stuff out of that with the small seeds, especially canola. You'll get some trash in there that gets into the grain bin if you get too picky with it. But I have ran up to 3 blockouts on the rotor, as far as rotor blockouts, but seems like we're always going back to just the first blockout in the concave. Seems to work the best the last couple of years. Our concave, I think max is 38 on these. We run about 30. You could run 38, would probably help, but if you get into a plug situation, you want to be able to open that thing up a little bit. So you don't want to be running maxed out just in case you do plug up. But yeah, open that thing up seems to help the best. Our feed accelerators, you can run it in slow or fast. We run them in slow. I haven't seen any difference running it in fast position, so I just slow it down. Just no need to run it so high. And any drum in your feeder house, we always run them, as high as they go. No different in your header. Pick everything up. Concave speed, we're running usually about 500 to 600. Just depends on if we're earlier in the year where it's a little green or not. But seems like about that 550 mark is where our concaves are running on both combines. Wind speed seems like 750 to 900. We primarily cut or raise Claremore non-GMO canola. I've cut some Roundup Ready canola that was a little tougher to thrash, so the settings were a little different. But as far as Claremore non-GMO, concaves at 550 and wind 750 to 900 seems to be where we're running our sieves. Lower sieves 3 to 5, and our top chaffer 13 to 15 seems to work really well. Our cut speed usually we're no more than 2.2 miles an hour. We're usually 1.8 to 2 miles an hour all day long. So it just seems like the more you push it, you start plugging headers and start having fun. So slower the better. And as far as combine setting, that's about all I have besides the rear tailboard. If you got a regular spreader, our S680 has the power cast tailboard, so you don't have to worry about it. But on the 9870, it has just the metal spreader vanes on the back tailboard, and we've learned the hard way. Any little nick, they get worn out and get a little nick in them, and any little nick in those, that green canola stalk catches, and it just gets a back leg quicker, and you can shut the combine off, and your back feed accelerator will be plugged up. So just making sure those back vanes are smooth, or start with new ones. Usually we can get a couple years out of them if you shave them off clean to start, because you're always cutting canola first. But that's the only major hiccup we've really had with either combine, cutting canola and causing any plug ups, I guess. We'll see. This is a picture where that crop divider ran on that 35-foot header with that longer crop divider sticking out farther. You can see on the sides after it goes through, you don't have hardly any side shattering. And I haven't had any experience with the side cutters, the vertical sickle bars, but I know guys have ran those. But just those row dividers help tremendously, because our 40-foot McDonald doesn't have them, and you can see. I think we're going to play a video here if it works. You might see that white sheen on the side after it cuts. But we'll see if we can get a video to play here. Maybe. There we go. So the video should show you, well, kind of, you can see on this S680, the drone's going over to, you can see how slow the reel's going. Like I mentioned before, even slower than you're traveling, you shouldn't have to use your reel much in canola. The more you do, the more you're gonna throw on the ground. So I think you can probably see that white sheen I'm talking about. Maybe not. But anyway, I'll give the controls over to Jesse here. I think that's all I got, unless anybody has any questions.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jesse Brunner, and I farm north of Elmira, Washington. We've been growing winter canola since about 2013. Like Josh, we're in a 2-year fallow rotation. We predominantly grow winter canola and winter wheat, and we've had pretty good luck with it. I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about how I set up my combine, the 8120, and just kind of some harvest tips in general. As with any harvest, we're trying to minimize loss, maximize throughput, and maintain a clean sample. And as you gain one of those areas, you tend to give up in another. So picking what's most important to you is a pretty important decision. I can tell you having a clean sample is the least important part of canola harvest. We haul all of our canola down to Viterra, and anything less than 5% dockage is not a big deal. And 5% actually looks pretty ugly. If you look in your bulk tank and it's totally clean, you're probably throwing grain out the back or going way slower than you need to go. So I would encourage anybody, if you can get the dockage checked when you haul yours in, that's a really handy piece of information to have. It helps you set your combine. You know, I shoot for 3 to 5% dockage. If I'm getting less than that, I feel like I left something out in the field. Looking at our combines, we'll start at the front. I'm pretty much going to echo a lot of things that Josh said about his combine. Just about any header can be used to cut canola, but some certainly do a lot better job than others. For my particular machine, I use a New Holland 760CG header. Anybody that has a Case flagship combine, these will go right on the front. You don't have to do anything. They have a full-fingered auger, and they have a cutter bar that you can extend out in front of the wheel about 2 feet. The extendable cutter bar really helps with keeping from shattering out canola with the reel, and the full-fingered auger feeds canola so much better. In fact, this last year I harvested canola with a neighbor of mine. He has a similar machine with a FD1 series McDon. It did pretty well, but the second you got somewhere with some mustard or any kind of inclement harvesting conditions, my full-fingered auger header pulled ahead, and the difference is pretty significant. When it comes to header loss, most of your header loss either comes from the reel shattering out the canola, or it comes off your crop dividers. Josh talked about what he's done. I've been experimenting with crop dividers. You can't actually see them in this picture here, but on mine, I have a rod that goes and sticks straight up off the end, and that seems to work pretty well, but it is something that I continue to experiment with. The biggest thing is you want smooth flow. On these pictures here, you can see that side shield on the left-hand picture has a really abrupt front edge on it. That is no bueno. On the right-hand side, they went and kind of covered it up with some plastic. Yeah, I've done the same thing on my machine, and that definitely helps a lot. With the reel, like Josh said, the idea is to use the reel as little as possible. You want it high and it's back towards the machine as much as you can get. You just want to touch the crop enough to get it to fall into the header. Anything more than that, and you're probably shattering pods. For you guys, draper headers, if you don't have a cross auger, you need one. I've known guys that have tried in the past, and they'll cut one field without it and everything will be great. They move into the next field and they can't do anything. And I think sooner or later you run into that situation if you don't have one. As I kind of spoke with earlier, no matter what you have, at some point, a header that is focused more on harvesting canola can be useful. The biggest thing here is that full fingered auger. In my case, when I'm not cutting canola, I use a stripper header to harvest my wheat. So I kind of have to have a second header. And that New Holland header that I have really works well. There's used ones available. They're not super expensive. And depending on how many acres canola you do, they can pay for themselves pretty quickly. When it comes to setting up your combine, the single one thing you can do that'll help you the most is to actually check your loss. This does not mean looking at the loss monitor on your screen. That tells you lies. You need to get out and actually measure what's coming out of the back of your machine and see what there is. Unless you know that, you're just guessing, and you can dump $100 an acre canola on the ground without even trying. To check your loss, there's a bunch of commercial options out there, although you can just as easily make something yourself. You just need something you can stick under the back of the machine while you're going. The commercial options are nice because they make it a one-man operation. Like the pan shown in the picture here is attached to the bottom of the column with electromagnet. So all you got to do is just flip the switch, the pan drops down, you collect your sample, and away you go. But a broomstick attached to a big plastic tub works just as well if you got two people. The hardest part of checking this is sorting the canola out of that ginormous amount of chaff. There really is no super easy way to do this. I use it doing a combination of screens and then use a leaf blower or a hair dryer to try and get the light stuff out. After you've done it a couple times, it goes pretty fast. It's just, you take an hour to check your loss and adjust your machine, and you save lots of money. Here's a picture of me with my screen. It attaches right to the side of my combine when I'm not using it. So that makes it really easy. Like I said, there's electromagnet on the bottom of my machine it attaches to. So in operation, you flip the switch, it drops down, and you got your sample. Here's some pictures showing what it's like trying to sort that stuff out. I start with like a 1/2-inch screen to get the big stuff, and then I go down to like a 1/4-inch screen to try and get the smaller stuff. And then to get the very last, you have to use air, either a hair dryer or a leaf blower carefully with a big bucket. Seems to work about as well as anything. Setting up your combine for canola, it's a little bit different than wheat. With wheat, we're trying to get everything thrashed out and then push it out of the rotor cage. Canola is the opposite. Canola is basically threshed out in the feeder house. The trick is actually to try and thresh it less and keep things inside the rotor cage, because otherwise you'll just overload your sieves. Here's kind of some comparison of how I set my combine for canola versus how I set it for wheat. I'll just kind of start at the front of the machine, work my way back. For concaves, I run small wire in the first 2 positions and then large wire in the back 2. I have my concaves open usually around 20. The tricky part here is you need to have your rotor running fast enough that you get the canola to separate out and drop out of the cage, but not any faster than that, any more speed in your rotor, and now you're just grinding stuff up and overloading your sieves. For my fan speed, 650 is kind of a starting point. You can blow canola out the back. It's not hard to do, but it's not super easy either. Generally what I recommend is you have somebody behind you checking your loss. You keep cranking your fan up until your sample looks clean. Check your loss again and then kind of dial it in from there. The biggest thing is if you get it too clean, you're probably using too much fan. For upper sieve, I used to run right about 15. I'm using an airfoil chaff for now from upper sieve. I do feel like that helps, but it's by no means necessary. And then your lower sieve, I'm running 8 to 12. A couple things that you do need to do for those of you with Case flagship combines. They make some covers that go over the cage above your number 1 and number 2 module positions. You want to cover those up. All those do is let excess junk out that you want to keep in the rotor cage. A lot of you might already have these because they're useful for wheat too. There's also a cover that goes underneath the straw chopper. There's a grate there for the same reason. keeps excess material off the sieves. Most of the combines I've seen already have these, but just check and make sure yours has it. At the back of your machine, at the chaff pan, there's actually 2 settings on that. You can lower that down 1 notch. The notch isn't punched out from the factory, but you can just take a punch and knock it out. It's already been laser cut. And what that does is it takes a little bit of the back pressure off of the cleaning system in your combine, and just helps things flow out the back better. With your straw spreaders, you need to be a little bit more careful. If you run those too fast, you can actually suck canola off your sieves. That's one thing that dropping a dust pan down a notch helps prevent. Generally try and keep your straw spreaders below 600 RPM, and that won't happen. As I say in this slide, one of the most important useful things you can do is do a kill stall. I know a lot of guys don't do this. I would strongly encourage you to use it. It's about the only way to make sure you're not getting any rotor loss with canola, because like I said, it won't show up on your rotor loss monitor. You do a kill stall, you go and look at the back at your rotor, poke in there with the screwdriver or something and see if there's any canola seeds still left in the mat of material. If there's not, you're good to go. If there is, you need to speed your rotor up, tighten your concaves down, do something. The best way to reduce loss is slow down. Like Josh said, this is a slow process. You're going to drive way slower than you're used to going in wheat. For the case flagship combines, the limitation is either going to be your header or your cleaning system. My experience has been my clean system can do about 600 to 800 bushels an hour. When I'm harvesting, I put the bushels per hour counter up on my screen, and I kind of drive to that. That seems to be a really good indicator of just how hard you can go. I mean, time is money, so we all want to get this done as quickly as possible, but it's not any good if you're throwing, 500 pounds of canola out the back of the machine. From there, ask if anybody has any questions.
The only thing I was going to chime in with, kind of on your kill stall too, you can, I forgot to mention it earlier, but just double check underneath your header from, underneath your header to your like front axle or underneath the combine. That tells you your header loss too, if you're overdoing it before your combine drives over anything. We do it in wheat, but especially in canola. That if you got a new driver or something, you can take them down there pretty quick and show them what they're losing before the combine even does it for them. So,
well, actually, to expand on what Josh was just saying, another thing I found helpful is when you start harvesting, you cut a little ways and then just stop and let the machine clean itself all the way out. And then you get out and you look under your machine, you find all those little pinhole leaks where canola's been leaking out, and you get your duct tape out or silicone or whatever you want to use and address them then. Because it's amazing the holes that stuff will sneak out of. And when you stop like that, you can build enough up under the machine, especially if it's kind of a low residue area of the field, to see what you got and then go from there.
Yeah. Josh, what do you run the chaffer and sieve at in your deer machines?
We're usually 3 to 5 on the lower sieve, and chaff for the upper we're 13 to 15, seems like.
Okay, yeah, that's similar to what we were. I never ran a case combine, but it kind of, so I don't know how the settings work exactly, but it was interesting that your bottom sieve, Jesse, is in a deer combine at least opened up pretty far. But
it's interesting. There's a really wide range of opinions when it comes to how you set your machine for canola. And, the best thing I can suggest is just experiment. I do know people with flagship machines that run their bottom sieves down to around 5 or 6, like the deer. For me, that seems to overload my return system. So you just have to kind of keep an eye on that. I've also heard of people doing stuff like putting a slotted concave module in the first position. That's something I'm actually going to experiment with this year. It's supposed to really help in really dry canola to keep from over threshing. For us, our canola is harvested around 6% moisture, so we're definitely on that really dry end of things. Yeah, there's just a lot of different opinions. The best thing you can do is experiment. It's
Yeah.
worth the time it takes to do it.
Yep. No, absolutely. Every situation's different and conditions are always different, even, on the same farm, field to field. So like you said, you just got to take the time to check and make adjustments and so on and so forth. Okay, if we don't have anything else for Jesse, thank you, Jesse. That was really good. And we'll move into Don.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Hello, everyone. So I'm Don Nodge. I farm in the Sunburst, Montana area. For those who aren't familiar, Sunburst is right along the Canadian border. We're right against the Canadian border and approximately 90 miles east of the Rocky Mountains. So way up there. We have somewhere around 12 to 14 inches of annual rainfall. We are a dryland area. Where I am, there is irrigation when you get about 60 to 70 miles south of where I am. Other crops that we seed and harvest along with the canola, malt barley, pulse crops, lentils, chickpeas, and some winter wheat. There's spring wheat in the area as well. We've been raising canola on our farm since 1992. And we have raised just about every kind you could imagine. Open pollinated with Intermountain canola back in the old days. Then we went to Roundup Ready. That was primarily Nexera. Then we went to the shatterless varieties, Invigor shatterless. That was L140. Then we raised some non-GMO, Seedless 40K, I believe was the variety we raised of non-GMO. And last year and this coming year for the 2021 crop, we're going to be raising some new seed varieties, which is the new varieties that are out that are the omega-3, canola that is high in omega-3, used for aquaculture for salmon ponds. So that is what we have raised for canola up here in north central Montana. So the question whether to swath or to straight cut, and I know in some parts of the country that all you do is straight cut, but here there are definitely decisions to make as to whether you need to swath it or you can leave it stand. The very first thing that needs to be looked at, of course, is what kind of variety are you raising? Of all those varieties that I just mentioned that we've raised, the only truly shatterless variety was the Invigor L140. And that was that is a very shatterless variety. In fact, it went through a pretty decent hailstorm the couple years we had that, and it stayed in the pod. So that was kind of the true test for it. Some of the other varieties that are coming along now that are advertised as shatter resistant or shatter tolerant, they're doing a better job than what it used to be back in the day when we started raising canola. Boy, we could not leave it stand. We get a lot of wind here in north central Montana, and once that canola gets ripe when it's standing, you get a lot of shatter. So let's go through a couple of things that first thing you got to look at. So I mentioned the varieties. Again, once you've gone past that, now I guess the next thing that I look at is I guess what I'll call the eye test. So in other words, you're just going out there and physically looking at the field. Here's a look at the inside of a pod that you can see that seed is really green. So that's your, that pod there, definitely not ready to swath yet. Here's a good picture that shows 3 different stages, if you will, of the seeds inside those pods. That top picture would have come out of a seed just like the one I just showed. Then that middle picture there, that there is definitely ready to swath. And the bottom picture, that's quite a bit riper than what we would swath in our part of the country. So here's one test that we use. Again, you're looking at this in the field, trying to figure out if it's ready to swath or not. You can, and every agronomist that we've ever talked with canola about has told me about this test to use on seeds that are like this. Take one of those seeds out of the pods, put it between your thumb and index finger, and just try to split it with your thumbnail. If you can split that and it splits clean, that's ready to swath. If it's a little bit wet and it mushes, not ready to swath yet. Again, just kind of a general thing that I've always been told to do, and we have done it with pretty great success. This middle picture here in our part of the country, if you've got seed that's that ripe when you're getting ready to swath, that's too ripe. What's going to happen is if you swath it as those seeds start getting that ripe, you're going to thrash it out with the swather. And, it's going to the drapers are going to run it right down into the middle of the swath, but it's going to lay it on the ground. So it's kind of this is kind of the first test we look at. Okay, so the next thing is you can actually, you're looking at your plants before you cut it. Here's a couple different pictures here. And again, every agronomist that ever told us, okay, how to decide if you want to swath canola or when it's time is if it's got, say 60 to 75% buckskin color. You can see this picture on the left has got a lot of buckskin color. This canola here is ready to swath. Here's a picture on the right side of a really thin stand. And again, you see a lot of buckskin color in that. That is ready to swath as well. I'll show you a couple pictures. Okay, this is our swaths from this past year. So that's stuff we've laid down already. We thought it was ready to swath, and I can tell you that it wasn't because we've already gotten the harvest sample results back on this canola, and it was anywhere from 3 to 3.5% green count. It's because we got out there a little bit too soon, and got one more picture of the same. Oops, I'm sorry. Let me get back to that. Of the same swath. There it is. Right there. Having troubles here. There we go. That swath there is the same picture of that other swath. We thought that had enough buckskin in it. It didn't. It's a little bit too green. So now and then, one thing I will add: why did we go out and swath that when it was that green? Another thing that we've always been told, and again we've used it with quite a bit of success, is if you're getting ready to go out there and swath canola, you don't want it to be really hot. Okay, if it's really hot right after you set canola down, after you swath it, and it's too green, that heat can set that green. And it's the first 24 hours that are the most important, we've always been told. So in other words, if you go out there and swath and it's going to be 90 degrees, if you start in the morning, it's going to be 90 degrees that day, bad day to swath. If it's going to be 65 degrees, a lot better. So the thing that the agronomist always tells you is, well, go out there, start late in the day after the heat has gone down, try to swath for 6 or 8 hours or whatever you can stand. Those first 12 hours at least will be cooler. So that helps too. That's why we thought, oh, this will be ready to go. It wasn't. It was a little bit too green. So if we'd have just made on this swath here, if we'd have waited another probably 2, maybe 3 days, it would have been ready to go. Okay, so here is a picture of someone combining the swath. You can see how ripe that swath is. So that one there is obviously ready to go. Of course, once you combine it, you're checking the moisture, so you're in good shape. Okay, so let's talk about different kinds of rollers. We've used just about every kind of roller. I'll kind of go over rollers. In maybe certain parts of the country, rollers are not used. You don't need to. We've got a lot of wind in our part of the country. So you can swath canola when it gets that buckskin color, and you know the swaths are heavy enough. You get them pushed down into the swath, into the stubble, which we try to cut 18 to 24 inches high, basically just below the pod range. That swath is nice and heavy, and it's going to stay in there. As that swath starts to dry out, though, that's when you can get into trouble with a wind if you haven't rolled. Back in the day, we never used to roll. We kind of got away with it, but I had neighbors who actually had, once the swath ripened up, that swath, big heavy winds came up, blew it right into the fence row, 100% gone. So rollers make all the difference in that situation. Here's old style pull behind roller, which we used to use, or you can also use the rollers which are attached right under the combine, right under the swather. If I can get to it, bear with me. There we go. So that's our swather that's got the roller attached right on it. As you can see, it's adjustable by this picture on the right side. You can see you could adjust it all the way up to the top of that piece of metal there. We've got it down to where that's all the way as low as that will go, and these tapered edges here will actually roll that. We'll tuck the sides of those swaths right down into the stubble against the ground. That's how we want it in our part of the country. Again, we get lots of wind, and it can really raise heck with the ripe swaths after they get ripe. And so I mentioned that we try to cut the stubble as high as we can when you're swathing. Not only does it help keep the canola down in there when it gets ripe, but that tall stubble is also great for snow capture, which is really important in our neck of the woods. Again, we only get 12 to 14 inches annual precip year round. That snow that canola catches, it can really be a big deal on certain dry years. And I guess the only other thing I would mention after we're done swathing is it generally, to get the swath to looking this ripe, it's got to sit there about 10 drying days. We found if you start trying to go much before 10 really good drying days, you're just going to bump into the green and moisture and have to wait. We always try to, so we always have to store our canola for sometimes lengthy periods of time. So we always try to cut it at 8% or less. We have found times when even that wasn't good enough. If you tried storing it in bins, especially bigger bins without aeration, I've seen them heat up bad. And you would think 8% would be dry enough, but if it's a good sized bin and you put it in there at 90 degrees, it's going to be trouble. So the other thing I would mention is aeration. I would never store canola in a bin without aeration, especially a better sized bin. So that concludes everything that I was going to talk about whether to swath or whether they're not to. And again, it's area specific. But those are some of the things that we have encountered in the years that I've raised it.
Don, what would you consider a larger sized bin?
So yeah, it seems like, Chris, well, I can tell you a real quick story that we that year that we didn't have aeration in a 6,000 bushel bin, put it in there at 6.5% moisture, but it was a really hot day that we stored that, put that in there. Put it in there about the middle of August, went to take it out about the second week of September. It was so hot you could barely keep your hand in there. I mean, it was getting ready to heat. We were lucky we took it out at that time. But we've stored canola in a lot of bins that are a lot bigger than that. We've got a lot of 15,000s and 20,000s. And boy, you don't dare put canola in bins that size. And again, if you're putting canola in a bin and it's that hot, if you're going to store it for any length of time, aeration, and it doesn't really take that much air to get that harvest heat out. But we just we just keep the air on it all the time. And it's just those simple 2-foot tubes that are stuck in the bins with a little half-horse fan is all it takes.
Yeah. One thing I noticed was one of those pictures you were picking up the swaths with a platform auger or draper head.
Okay, so actually that was a picture that I got from Karen. So that was not any of ours. This picture right here is we pick them up with pickup attachments. But yeah, no, we don't use the straight cut header. I guess in your guys' part of the country, you maybe can.
Well, yeah, that was going to be my question, was if you could use either one.
And I've had no experience with anything other than we've always had pickup attachments, primarily for the canola. We used to pick up barley with them too, but that's just what if we swath canola, we use pickup attachments. But gosh, I think you can use just about anything that you've got.
All right. Thanks to all the panelists there for those presentations. First of all, really appreciate you guys taking the time to do that. I think they looked really good. We answered a couple questions in the Q&A. I think there's one outstanding right now. How short would you swath if you're harvesting with a pickup header?
Hey, Chris, I know going back through his video, Don had mentioned he cuts it as high as he can, even with a pickup header, just to keep it from blowing around. And since he's smashing it in there anyway, kind of protects it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Kind of limit the amount of material going through the machine too. You have that option. So yeah, I think with as windy as their area is, that how he mentioned that they want all the stocks there to hold things down.